Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse and the movies and TV shows that I feel best represent them. So this is high concept horror video number 3, and for this one you're going to get 16 movie recommendations and 4 TV show recommendations. These are a lot darker in subject matter than what I normally recommend for you guys, and they're a lot more gory than what I recommend. I think that the concept of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is a darker idea, so I just kind of went suit with that. So the first one that we have to talk about would be the White Horse, Pestilence. This one is also known as Conquest, but I felt like the infectious disease route would be a better one to take with this. And so the first movie that I went with would be Cabin Fever. In this one, we have a group of college students who are on vacation, and they happen onto an infected water source, and some of their own start getting a flesh-eating disease. This movie is just super gross, and definitely not one that I would just watch any given time, but I think that it works absolutely well with Pestilence. So the next one that I wanted to talk about would be Contagion. This one definitely hits close to home, as it really accurately represents what all would happen if there was a global pandemic. Obviously, that is something that became a reality for us a few years back, but I think that if you really take a chance to watch this movie after having dealt with all of those things that we did, it will be a lot more impactful than when it came out in 2011. So the next one that I wanted to talk about would be It Follows. In this one, we have our main character who ends up hooking up with her boyfriend and essentially gets an STD curse from him. And she is relentlessly followed by a shape-shifting entity that only she can see after that point. So the last one that I wanted to talk about as far as Pestilence goes would be Resident Evil. In this one, we have a group of individuals who have to go into a high-tech facility called the Hive, where the T virus has had an outbreak, causing most of their workers to become members of the undead, and they are trying to stop the spread of that to the rest of the world. I know a lot of people don't really like this franchise if they are big fans of the game. However, I am someone who just grew up watching these movies over and over with my brothers, so they're always going to be nostalgic watches for me, and especially this first movie in particular. So the TV show that I wanted to go with as far as Pestilence goes would be The Stand. And I am talking about the one from 2020. I still haven't seen the first adaptation of this one. However, it's on my list. But in this one, we have a Stephen King story where there is a plague called Captain Trips that has wiped out almost the entire population of the world. And it really deals with the different survivors and their interactions between each other, as well as just the fight between good and evil. And admittedly, the infectious disease part of this show is only in the very beginning of it, but I think that it is, an important part of it, so I think it belongs with Pestilence here. So the next horseman, the red horse, is War. And I did not go with any war horror movies. I don't know if I've really seen any, and if I have, it definitely wouldn't have been enough to compile this list. So I went with Bloodshed, which is also associated with this horseman. And so the first movie that I wanted to talk about as far as Bloodshed goes would be Evil Dead. And of course, I am talking about Evil Dead from 2013. In this loose sequel, we have a group of individuals who go to a remote cabin in order to help one of their own kick an addiction. And one of the people there finds a flesh-bound book and decides that it is a swell idea to read the Latin. And so there are demons unleashed upon them because of that. And this movie is just incredibly gory throughout. And there's even a scene toward the end where it is literally raining blood. So I think that it is the perfect movie to talk about with Bloodshed. The next one that I want to talk about is Terrifier. And really any of the movies in this franchise could have gone in this spot because they are really gory for gore's sake. but I did go with this original just due to the fact that that's really all that's going on in this one. It's just about the gore. The story that we do get, it's basically just a couple girls that are hanging out on Halloween and they cross paths with a very sadistic clown. And I know that there's not a lot going on in this one, but it is one that I will always look on fondly due to the fact that it is the first thing that really scared me when I watched it in such a long time. I think that that's always something that we are looking for as horror fans. So the next one that I want to talk about would be Saw. Now, this one is not the most gory one in its franchise or anything. However, it did spawn an entire franchise of gory films, and it even spawned the torture porn subgenre, which is also a bunch of gory stuff. So in this one, we have two men that are stuck in a hideous bathroom, almost as bad as what you would see in any gas station or your local Walmart. But we have them trying to play Jigsaw's game in order to try to live. Then the last one that I wanted to talk about as far as movie recommendations for bloodshed would be Dead Alive or Brain Dead, depending on where you live. And in this Peter Jackson cult classic, we have a main character whose mother ends up getting bitten by an animal, and that turns her into a manic zombie. And this has one of the goriest final acts that I've ever seen, for sure. I've only gotten to watch this movie one time, back when I was in high school. A friend of mine showed it to me. He was definitely into a lot of like cult classic horror movies, and I had never seen anything like this before. And it was definitely impactful to remember it all these years later. It's just been hard to track down with it being a foreign film, but if you can stream this one anywhere, if you can find it where you live, I would recommend doing that. So then the TV show that I wanted to talk about for bloodshed would be Slasher. And this is a Canadian anthology, so I'm not really going to discuss the story or anything since that does change each season. But it is a very, very gory show throughout all of the seasons that I've seen. I have only seen 1 through 4. I've watched just a little bit of season 5, but I kind of fell off of watching it because sometimes I like to binge watch an entire season, and I was trying to watch that as it came out each week. But I definitely intend to go back to it at some point because I just find the show overall to be a lot of fun. So moving on to our next horseman, we have the Black Horse or Famine, and I went a couple different routes with this one. So the first movie that I wanted to recommend would be The Menu, and this is the only one that's really food related. And in this, we have a group of mostly very rich people who go to a very remote restaurant where they can try the cuisine of an eccentric chef, and they get more than they bargained for. And I don't really want to explain it any more than that to you, just because I think going into this one blind is the best route. So for the rest of the recommendations with Famine, I actually went with the idea of how hungry you could be to resort to cannibalism. So the next movie that I want to talk about would be The Green Inferno. In this one, we have a group of activists who are going to the Amazon in order to save it, and they definitely figure out that they are the ones that are going to need the saving. This one is another one that is super gross, and maybe the most gory one on the list is the one that makes my stomach churn the most, that's for sure. So if you're a gore hound and you haven't watched this, you definitely need to. The next one that I wanted to talk about would be Raw. And in this French film, we have a veterinarian student who happens to be a vegetarian who gets hazed and made to eat raw meat. And then she gets just more of a desire to taste flesh. And this one definitely hits home for me because I am a lifelong vegetarian. And to be honest, I would have just noped out of that situation. There would have been no movie to watch at that point. I would have just gotten out of it. But then the next one that I wanted to talk about would be Hannibal. And this one is one where we follow Dr. Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling once again. It takes place while Hannibal Lecter is not in custody, and it is after the events of Silence of the Lambs, and he has a run-in with one of his previous victims. This one has just remained in my brain ever since I watched it. I think that the dinner scene that we get in here is what really earns it a spot on my list right here. So for the TV show recommendation, I wanted to go with The Walking Dead. And I can't think of anything that is more hungry than a zombie, or should I say a walker. In this epic spin-off spawning show, we have groups of survivors that are trying to survive the ever-present threat of zombies, as well as the even worse threat of all of the other survivors. And I think that this one and The Stand are kind of similar due to the fact that the people that end up surviving things like this are not always the best people, and some of them are the worst people imaginable. And they have tons of horrible people in The Walking Dead, that's for sure. So for our final horseman, the pale horse, we have death. And I also went a couple different routes with this one as well. First up, we have Final Destination. In this millennial horror classic, we have a group of people who have just survived a near-death experience, and death has to come for them one by one after that. And I think that they really personify death in here, and I think it's an interesting concept for sure, and it has inspired its own entire franchise. So for the rest of these, though, I went with death and grief and how people deal with that. So the first one that I want to talk about under that idea would be Pet Sematary. This one deals with a family that had an unimaginable loss of their son, and they have to learn the hard way that sometimes dead is better. This is one that I did really like, and I thought was very good. It was sad and impactful back when I watched it previously, but I have absolutely zero interest in watching this for the foreseeable future. And some of you guys might know this, I do have a little boy myself that kind of reminds me of Gage in this movie. However, my son's a lot younger than him. But yeah, I just have zero desire to watch it due to, what happens to him in this movie. And I think most people know exactly what that is. But I won't go into it super much. That way, anybody who has not seen this one yet isn't having it spoiled completely. Then the next one that I want to talk about would be Hereditary. And in this one, we have a family that has had 2 losses recently. And they are just kind of finding out that they are in a horrible situation due to what one of the ones that had passed recently had been a part of prior. And this one is just an absolute gut-wrenching movie. I think that it is such a hard rewatch, honestly, due to Toni Collette's performance, and it is a powerhouse performance at that. It is so, so good, but it is ultimately very, very hard to watch, and it's a definite downer movie. And speaking of downer movies, the last movie recommendation I have for you is Bring Her Back. And in this one, we have a brother and sister who end up having to move in with a foster mother who has actually lost her daughter recently. And she will stop at nothing to do exactly what the title suggests. This one is definitely a downer, and I definitely needed a palate cleanse after I watched it for the first time because it's heavy. It's very heavy. But I thought that it was an absolutely excellent film, and I highly recommend it. So for the TV show that I paired with death, I went with The Haunting of Hill House. And in this adaptation of Shirley Jackson's novel, we have a family who has dealt with loss in the past as well as the present. And it all stems from the time that they spent living in Hill House. And really any of Mike Flanagan's TV shows I probably could have put here because I think almost all of them deal with death and grief very well. But I did go with this one since it was the one that I really fell in love with first. And I think that it is just honestly incredible. I think Mike Flanagan is just an absolute master of the craft, and this one is the perfect example of that. So, what did you think of my list? Did you agree with the choices that I made, or would you have put different movies and TV shows in their places? Let me know that down in the comments. Also, if you have any recommendations for different high concept horror videos or just my regular videos that you would like to recommend to me, you can leave those in the comments as well. You can follow me on Instagram for updates on my channel as well as additional horror content. You can also follow me on Letterboxd to see what I have been watching lately and my brief thoughts on any of those movies. If you want either of those socials, they are linked in my channel description for easy access for you guys. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting me so far. It really means the world to me. My name is Devin. This is Carpenter Hill. Thanks for watching.